Hey everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Safety Nights Heat Safety Summit. I want to thank you for being here this week, and for anybody who is new, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping items. I'm Dan Abatoy. I am the head of operations for Safety Nights, and so with that in mind, we'll jump through how to operate Crowdcast in case this is new to you. If you haven't registered your email, please do that. You should have received an email from Crowdcast asking you to register or just verify. Click that, and until you do that, I believe the chat questions, things like that, are going to be locked. So if you haven't done that already, please go over and do that. 2, if you have any questions for Russell at any point in time during this session, feel free to add them to the Q&A section. You'll find that button to the right on the right hand side of your screen. It's going to look like a question mark icon. Just click that, toss any questions you want in there. And if you see any questions in there that really resonate with you and you were going to ask that same question, feel free to upvote that. You'll see a little up arrow. You can click on that, and that'll just give us an indication as to how important and relevant that question is to everybody here. Lastly, if you have any questions about this session, the summit as a whole, feel free to send me a message here in this chat, or you can email me here. And I'm just tossing this in our chat now. My email is right there, so feel free to send me an email if you need that. Now, without further ado, I will turn the stage over to Russell, the person you are actually here to hear from. So, Russell, the stage is all yours.
Thanks, Dan. Just making sure you can hear me okay, Dan?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Russell Pink. To give you a little bit of background about who I am, I have been in the aviation industry for over a decade now. I started out in a number of operational roles, from ramp agent through to move team, pushing aircraft around an airport, which is always good fun. And then I found my way into safety management, first of all with British Airways, and then most recently with United Airlines. As you can tell from the accent, I am based over in the UK. I'm based in London around Heathrow Airport. But my job at United especially has taken me all around the world, and one of the areas that I'm most interested in is the area that I'm here to speak about today, which is all around safety innovation, new ways of working, and specifically around trying to keep our people safe from extreme heat. So that's a little bit about me. I am here today to talk about our approach towards preventing heat illness, most of all in our ramp workers at the airports. And I am aware that we're a multi-industry summit, so I will try and use layman's terms. We, as an industry, love acronyms, but I will try my best to leave them out. We can talk a little bit about the actual problem discovery, the problem finding that we had to go through, and then kind of where we are in that solutioning journey. So just to start out with, some of you may be familiar with the kind of change management curve, but just to add a little bit of context, because I like to keep everybody aware of kind of where we are on this journey. So you may be familiar with this, but I would say that somewhere between step 2 and step 4 or 5 is kind of where we are right now on this journey through managing heat illness, managing heat stress. For years and years, the aviation industry has operated in certain ways. I think it's one of those industries that, you don't want to change too much because it's very, very vulnerable if you do. So trying to change that status quo, trying to change your old beliefs can be very challenging. At all levels of the business, that isn't just dealing with frontline and management. All levels of the business can be very risk averse for good reason. So I would say the minute you start to change that mindset, you can start to see some big changes. Your performance may drop. And this, I think, can be applied to multiple industries, which is why I wanted to include it today. Be aware, be prepared for change in your performance as you start to challenge those status quos. You will have to start to unlearn certain things that you thought you knew before. We certainly have. I certainly have. There's a lot of preconceptions around hydration, around heat, around basic employee safety that actually will change. What we know now will probably be very different in 30, 40 years from now. But what the goal is to get to is beyond that kind of transformational idea, and get on that upward curve back to improving performance, improving safety, but having that new status quo where people are safer, organizations are better equipped, and are less vulnerable. So what we needed to do was we all know heat is a problem. I'm sure it's been spoken about multiple times this week already. No matter what your political beliefs, no matter what your beliefs are around climate change, the world is getting warmer. The data is there, the science is there to say that the world is getting warmer. We are seeing that. We're also seeing extreme cold as well. So just temperature in general is causing problems for workers. But the problem we found was actually it is a well-known problem industry-wide on a federal level with OSHA and other authorities and regulatory bodies around the world. But really, what does the problem mean to us at United Airlines? How much of a problem is it in terms of injuries, in terms of sickness, in terms of health? And we realized very quickly that we didn't know a great deal about how it was impacting our business. If you actually looked at our number of heat stroke injuries, heat stress injuries, taxonomized as such, the number was actually quite low. I'm talking less than 20 a year, perhaps. So we're obviously in that debate now of, well, how big of a problem is it? Do we need to do anything? Is it that much of a problem? Are our current mitigations and our current control measures enough? The science says not. Given the statistics that the Bureau of Labor put out there, given the statistics all around the world of how many employees are affected each year through heat, suggests the problem is there. You just might not know about it. So we did a little bit of very high level data correlation, very high level looking up, how our business is impacted during extreme heat, during extreme cold as well. And there is a definite relationship, shall we say, and this is not to say correlation is causation, but there's a relationship between extreme heat and then an uptick in injuries, certain injury types as well, such as overexertion injuries, muscular injuries, slips, trips, and falls as well. There is a definite peak during the extreme heat months. So what we decided to do is we tried to obviously dig down into these problems. So these 4 tasks that you can see on the screen right now is kind of where we're at and what we had to do. So obviously, what I just spoke about, trying to find out what the problem is. What are our top threats here? Where are we being hurt as well? We're a global business. We have operations, all over the world in hot and cold climates. Where are we better focused on looking for solutions and trying to figure out what the problem is? The problem mapping phase as well. Really, I cannot stress enough the importance of digging down to the granular data here. Is it affecting a ramp worker in their 50s? Is it affecting an aircraft technician in their 30s? Really get down to the granular detail, because your solution will most likely have a much greater effect if you have a well-defined problem to actually go and solve. Once you have figured all of that out, which is no quick process, it can take some time to get down to that level of detail. Look for those solutions. What have we got already within our current mitigations, within our current protection plans? What is readily available to you on the market? What is out there as an off-the-shelf product? Or is it something that you want to create from scratch, whether it in-house, be it an external provider? There's plenty of ways to go about this. We also talk about Horizon 1, 2, and 3 solutions that may be familiar to some of you. But if you can try and find a Horizon 1 solution, then we're talking a solution that could have an immediate impact within months. Horizon 2 maybe a year from now, 18 months from now. And then Horizon 3 obviously is that longer term. It's going to take a while to get set up. You could be looking for a larger financial responsibility, but really it could be a massive long-term solution. And then look for those short-term proof of concept ideas. Quick win, quick loss. I think if some of you may be familiar with Oscar Munoz, one of our previous CEOs at United Airlines, He was fine to fail, but his mantra was fail fast, learn fast, try again. And that's really what innovation should be about. It's trying to be okay with failure and be okay with finding out what you don't know. And it can be quite uncomfortable. I will say this to some leaders in the business, it can be a very uncomfortable conversation to delve into the unknown. So be prepared to do that if you are going on this journey, and be prepared to have those slightly challenging and uncomfortable conversations. So what did we decide to do? So we decided to look at this from two sides, hence the title of this slideshow. There's both the individual and the organizational level of protection here. We looked at multiple solutions from an individual level, things that could give workers power over their own actions, empowerment over their body, their physiological state, their own confidence that they're actually taking action to take care of themselves, and in the moment mitigation. So, not having to wait for the water truck to come round that is being provided by the company, but actually if you are in a state of stress or illness, being able to make that empowered, educated action to take better care of yourself. Then there's obviously the organizational element. We want to try and make sure that as United Airlines, we are providing our workers with the safest possible working environment. We want to make sure that we are complying with regulatory bodies, and many of you might be aware, OSHA are looking at bringing in much stricter or more localized, should I say, under the new administration, guidance and rules and laws. So we have to be ready for that. We have to be ready for that change. We have to try, obviously, as a hierarchy of control to protect the collective. This isn't just about the individuals who need it the most. This is about protecting the collective as well. Not only that, though, we also realize that we have a chance to try and increase productivity and try to increase operational efficiency. And I'll come on to this in a little bit about the challenges we faced around how do we sell these ideas to operational leaders. Myself, in corporate safety, it's very easy. It's the right thing to do. It's the good thing to do by our employees. But what do our operational leaders say when it's going to cost X number of dollars and require maybe an extra head or two, or require an extra system to be in place? All of a sudden, you start to get asked those challenging questions. The next thing is about hazard identification. This goes a little bit back to what I said before. We didn't necessarily have a good handle or know much about what the heat was doing to our employees. If we were able to find a solution from an organizational oversight level, we could actually identify that hazard moving forward. We can better understand how this is impacting our business and impacting our people. So if we could do both of these things, we see increased benefits. And it's a bit of a, each one feeds the other. If you have good organizational protections and oversight, you will give the employees confidence and the know-how that the company is trying to take best care of you. Equally, if you have people who are taking control of their bodies and their health and their well-being and providing themselves with the right hydration, the right nutrition, that feeds into protecting each other, increased productivity. So it's a bit of a kind of a perpetual cycle if you can get it right. And this is why we decided to go down this route. Now, starting with the individual, I'm just going to take a little bit of a hydration break myself. Starting with the individual protections, we worked with, and we're still in trials with, this company called Epicor Biosystems. Some of you may be familiar with them. They offer a wearable, and the picture there on the right-hand side, you can see on the bicep of the male individual there. This is a adhesive patch that sticks to the skin and measures sweat and electrolytes, and basically fluid loss of the body during sweat. What we decided to do is we set up a relatively small, quick study. Again, going back to the quick POC mindset. We went to Houston, nice hot station. We see a lot of good temperatures down there, high humidity at times as well. We found 6 subgroups of our ramp employees to test this on. 26 willing volunteers took part over a 4-week period, and we had 238 recorded sessions. What that basically means is that we had 238 work shifts recorded. Across that time, what we found was we had 8 dehydration alarms. Now, what that equates to is a 2% body weight fluid loss. So that basically means you need to stop what you're doing and rehydrate. Otherwise, you are at severe risk of heat illness, heat stress, and those more severe problems. What we found was that there was a 10 degree Fahrenheit difference between the temperature that you might get on your mobile phones as part of the heat index or the weather service, to actually what the ambient temperature, or the experienced temperature, sorry, is with the worker. The most important aspect of this POC that we saw was the behavioral change. We saw workers taking heed of these alarms that they were being provided by this device and the advice it was giving them through a mobile app to actually rehydrate and take action in the moment, as opposed to waiting a prolonged period of time and then potentially entering into a more significant heat stress situation. And we could see that through the data that it was being gathered. You could see the input that people were putting into their apps on what liquids they were taking on, what electrolytes they were having, to actually combat that dehydration. So it was a really valuable insight, and we have decided to take this forward to further studies, which I'll come on to shortly when I talk about the next steps. But just to give you a little bit more insight into the actual product, again, we're just testing this right now. We have not bought, we've not kind of entered into any kind of commercial procurement with Epicor, but what we are seeing from this device is some really valuable insights in terms of the impact of heat on our workers. The patch, as you can see there, is an adhesive patch. It sticks to the skin, and it's got a little module that clicks into it, and then that measures the sweat loss from the skin, measures the electrolyte loss as well, the sodium in your sweat, and it provides the worker with in the moment reminders if they are losing fluid. So for every 16-ounce bottle of water they lose, it says you need to go and add a 16-ounce bottle of water. Gives you those kind of preemptive warnings. If you enter into a significant dehydration event, then it will sound an alarm. It provides a more aggressive alarm in some ways to say, hey, you need to stop what you're doing and go and rehydrate. We, like I said, we just rolled this out into another station. We actually have just been to Guam in the Pacific to roll this out there. And what we actually saw within the first 2 hours of people using it was 2 dehydration alarms, because it's a very humid station. So in terms of benefits, we really are seeing in the moment action here through this system. So we're really looking forward to seeing how this next study in Guam goes. We're looking forward to seeing the organizational aspect of this as well, because the warnings to the workers is one part of this, but you actually get aggregated data. So not the personalized data, we're keeping that protected, but aggregated data. So for example, this team on this shift have experienced this level of average sweat loss, and this is their hydration issues. So as a company, we can really see where the higher risks are. Now, before I move on to the organizational, I'm going to pause. Dan, I think we said we could take some questions halfway through. If there's anything that's pertinent and you want to go through a couple of them now, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, we can jump in anytime. So we don't have any questions as of yet, but it's also a good reminder. Anybody, if you have questions, feel free to toss them in the chat, and we can bring those up as they come in.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, if there's anything pops up, just call me out, Dan, and we can stop and go through those. I'm happy to do in the moment, or we can wait until the end. So just moving on to the organizational aspect. So what can we do to protect the collective? What can we do to gain better oversight and identify our hazards more effectively? We started to work with a company called Smart Cone Technologies. They had a product called Heat Guardian. They actually originally developed this in tandem with Disney down in Orlando. They focused this more on athletics, but what we wanted to do is see if it had any application in the aviation field. So we started to do a lot of discovery. We did a 6-month POC, just basically trying to gather a lot of data. This was very R&D, also in Houston, because this had not been done before. And to give you a little bit of background of what Heat Guardian actually is, these are the machines themselves. So they are microclimate sensors that you can position around the airport environment, and they will collect very localized data, and they will provide wet bulb globe temperature readout. So slightly different to heat index. I'm sure many of you on the call are familiar with the differences, but really just factoring in a lot more environmental inputs to give you a more accurate reading of the actual impact of heat on the body. So these sensors were positioned in various areas around the Houston airfield, in shaded areas, in sunny areas, areas with certain prevailing winds, different solar loading throughout the day. So you could really start to build up an idea of kind of what each environment, which little micro environment can do in terms of heat. And we saw some pretty significant differences between areas that were only a few hundred meters apart. Now, what that told us was having a blanket mitigation for the whole airport is fine because you're trying to protect the collective at the end of the day. But actually, within that environment, especially at a large airport, within that environment, you might actually have high risk and low risk areas that you can move people to, or you can kind of rotate people in and out of. You also have high risk and low risk activities depending on the strenuous activities taking place. So what we started to look at was how can we better protect employees while maintaining productivity, while maintaining the operational efficiency. That didn't mean we just had to bring people off the ramp, put them in a break room, put them in a cool area, make them sit down for half an hour to an hour. How can we actually maintain the operation? Because when I go back to talking about those challenging, difficult conversations that you might have with operational leaders, it's about that. It's about, okay, we get that this is the right thing to do, but what does it mean to the business? What does it mean to the operation to actually enact this? And I quickly found out that the narrative in which you have that conversation really, really matters. If you're talking with safety professionals, as we are, we all know this is the right thing to do. We all know to try and remain compliant, to try and keep people safe. This is the right thing to do. If you are, let's say, talking with a operations control manager who is responsible for the punctuality, for the operation of that airline, they're going to have very different questions, and they're going to have very differing priorities as well, quite rightly so. So you have to make sure that you're telling the right story. And it could be the same story, but you're just going to have to find different ways of telling it. And that's what we had to do to kind of get operational buy-in. The sensor, as I mentioned, works like this. So you have different inputs. It can be solar powered as well, which means it's great because it's self-sustaining. We've had units sat out on the tarmac for 18 months, not plugged in, and they're absolutely fine. They work brilliantly. So they're very self-sufficient. And this is what we started to look at. We started to build a dashboard out that really kind of highlighted where those high risk and low risk areas were that I was talking about. So as you can see here with the map of Houston Airport, you can see the heat map quite literally of where those high risk and low risk areas are. The hotter the temperature, the redder the color. What you see on the left-hand side here is a dashboard that was created to try and fit aviation. And you have different tasks broken down into different locations. Each of those tasks has obviously different exertion levels. So they all have a very different heat rating, if you like. So someone performing a certain task, for example, loading the pit of a narrow-body aircraft, taking bags in and out, could do that for, let's say, 3 jobs back-to-back before they have to stop or rotate to a safer place. Someone who is doing a far less strenuous task, maybe just scanning bags, or maybe as a kind of ramp lead role where there's less exertion, could maybe do the same job for longer. So you have to factor in all these different elements to try and figure out the best way of working. Now, the challenge we found with this was that it was very restricting. And there's a lot of variables. For those of you in aviation, for those of you who use aviation, you may know that the things it takes to get an aircraft away on time is huge. There are just so many different variables within the operation that if we were to just try and implement this dashboard, it wouldn't work very well. There'd be too many restrictions. There'd be too many things getting in the way. So what we did was we had to figure out what the next steps look like for this. We believe that there is value here. We believe that the organizational protection from Heat Guardian could work, but we've had to really, really dig down and figure out what those next steps look like. So I'll go over this quite simply. So what we found out, and this is from both the Epicor and the smart cone concepts, is that some of our existing measures were not adequate. We could be doing a lot more, but also at times we're also overprotecting. So therefore, from an operational side, we may be overprotecting, and there's other issues with that. There's other outcomes of that. But also, are we actually aware of the problem that we might have? Like I said already, task rotation and location are two key elements. You kind of already knew this just by speaking to workers, by speaking to kind of our coordinators in our ops centers. They already knew that. They already try to move people around. They try and move people off the flights that they know are more strenuous, more bags, heavy cargo, that kind of thing. But there was no framework. There's nothing for them to use or to fall back on when times got tough and when those challenges started to occur. So that's what we wanted to try and build for them. And ultimately, what we found from doing both of these studies is that we could increase productivity and keep people safe. And that is, I think, the biggest seller for any leader out there, is that safety does not necessarily mean having to stop operations or having to, lose money. It can mean an increased productivity. It can mean a better operating airline in our case. So those were some of the key conclusions that we took from both those studies. Now, where are we going with these? I've already mentioned Guam for Epicor. Now, for Heat Guardian, we have been working with our teams in Phoenix, Arizona. We decided to move to a slightly smaller station to do a little bit more in-depth study and how we could use this. So the exciting news is that we're actually heading out to Phoenix in about 3 weeks' time for this to actually go live for the 2025 summer season. So we're going to be utilizing the Heat Guardian tool live in our Phoenix operation for the duration of summer on a trial basis to see what the benefits are. And what we've done with SmartCone is develop an application that looks a bit different to the dashboard you saw before. And that it looks a little bit more like a resource management tool that you may be familiar with in your own industries. In how you move people around and how you assign tasks. So it's going to be very interesting over the next 6 months to see the outcomes of that study. And I am more than happy to share those, as we go on and see what the benefits are. The key element here is getting the operating groups. Now, I don't know how each of our organizations are structured, but we at United obviously have corporate safety where I sit, but then there's individual operating groups as well that manage the operation. And trying to get their buy-in and get their ownership is key. And that's what we're starting to see now. We're starting to see the operating groups in Phoenix really buy into this, take ownership, offer their insights, and really take this and run with it. And that's also key to implementing any new ideas. Same thing goes for Guam and Epicor. It's getting that ownership, that buy-in from the groups. We have another few weeks to run in Guam with that study. And I think from the end of that, we'll be looking at a targeted rollout. We'll be looking at kind of trying to offer these devices on a voluntary basis to those stations that might need it most in the southern states, in the Pacific region, in the Latin American region, trying to offer these out as a kind of wellness device, really, just to try and keep people safe. And then with the Heat Guardian, what we're looking to do at the end is, again, very similar, look at a targeted rollout. If there are benefits from this, which we'll find out by the end of the summer, where can we take this next? Where can we really get the most value out of this, again, in those hot weather stations, hot weather regions, to try and better protect people? So that's really the journey we've been on with Heat. It's early days. Like I said, going all the way back to the change management curve, we are probably somewhere between steps 2 and steps 4 or 5. We're on that downward curve where, you're implementing change. We might start to see impact on operation, but the goal is to get out of that and get out the other side with these inspirational, transformational ideas that could make the operation a better place to work and provide more value to our customers. That's the journey we've been on. It's a pleasure to explain it. It's a pleasure to talk about it. And Dan, I'm happy to answer any questions or elaborate on anything that you would like me to. So I just want to say a big thank you.
Yeah, and Russell, thank you. That was all I can say is I don't think I will look out the airplane window as we're everybody's boarding the same way again. Just that was the really made me think about things in a very different way. So thank you for that. Um, I actually do actually have a question. In terms of talking about that dot where this change may start affecting operations. What is kind of what's your thought around that, right? Like, how are you preparing yourself for that situation to ensure that as you continue to do these studies and make these changes, that you get through that downward kind of trough, so you can get to the other side of that, in which it's been, these changes have been adopted on mass scale that leads to a safer environment.
It's a great question, and I know I spoke about the challenges before a little bit, and it really boils down to the human element. It really boils down to the conversation and the narrative that you're having with people within your business at all levels. If people if people don't understand the why behind what you're doing, the chances are the chances of success will be very low. Um, it's absolutely imperative that people understand the why, but also people understand how their priorities fit in with what you're doing. Um, I use the analogy of you're having to tell the same bedtime story four different ways, because ultimately speaking, the story doesn't change, but the outcome might. You speak to an operational leader, they want to know, is this going to impact on time performance? Is it going to impact my bottom line? So really going into discussions, going into conversations, making sure you know your audience, making sure you know who you're speaking to. That's one of the biggest learning experiences I've had throughout this entire journey. And I can't speak highly enough of the importance around that. You will come across naysayers. You will come across people who don't believe it's a problem. Genuinely, you have that, and I've met those people from various companies, various organizations, saying, "Is this really worth the time and the hassle and the money? Is it really a problem for, especially for large organizations?" So I think it's absolutely key that we keep the narrative going, we keep that conversation going, because I think really the data and the science is there, and the way that some of the regulations are moving, we need to make sure we're having the right discussions with the right people.
Yeah, great. That's a great answer. So thank you. Jennifer has a question. She has tossed in, and she's asking, what has your data with Epicor shown regarding dehydration during winter slash milder weather? Dehydration is a year-round problem.
Yep, and actually, something that I failed to mention during the actual presentation is that the original study in Houston that took place around September, October time. So not typically your hottest period in Houston by far. I think, if I remember rightly, the ambient temperatures around that time were in the average 80s Fahrenheit. We had 8 dehydration alarms. So what that told us was that, well, we're not even in the triple digits here, which Houston experiences. They can experience 90 days straight sometimes with triple digit heat. So what that told us is that this is a problem all year round. Absolutely, Jennifer. It also could end up, and this is where we have to go next with these studies, is amendments to our heat illness prevention plans. So we already have heat illness prevention plans, but they're very much based on kind of not industry wide, but just national, global assumptions and the science that we already know. That you start enacting certain things at certain temperatures, and you have different stages. Actually, we might need to rethink that. If these devices are telling us that certain individuals are having dehydration issues, even in temperatures in the 70s, then it's no good waiting until you're in the high 80s or 90s before you start enacting change. You need to go sooner. Or you could look at it from another approach, which is, do you have kind of personal protection plans like you would, in evacuations, having personal evacuation procedures? So there's multiple ways we could look at it, but it's absolutely shown us that even in the milder weather, and probably even in the winter, we're yet to do a cold weather study, but even in those colder temperatures or the cooler temperatures, that dehydration is an issue.
Yeah, great question. That really brings me back to even some of the things we've talked about in our previous sessions, right? And one of the things that kind of a data point in which like 80, I think it's like 80% of the people are generally like all of us, right? 80% of us are dehydrated most of the time, right? And that's maybe just not even doing anything in heat. That was great. Great question, Jennifer. Feel free again while Russell is here. We'll give it a few more minutes. Toss in any additional questions you may have. Um, as we wait for those to come in, all I can say is again, Russell, thank you. Really appreciate your time and energy to be a part of this and joining us all the way across the pond. So I appreciate your time. Appreciate everything you put into this and sharing your kind of case study with all of us so that we can hopefully take something from this and again make it a safer work environment for everybody. Um, so I guess you must have done a great job. Doesn't look like there's too many more questions coming in. I don't see any right now. Um, but all I can say is thank you, and again appreciate everything that you brought to the table today.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, Dan, and thank you for involving me in this discussion. My We spoke a little bit about this earlier, kind of about having a potential call to action for people on this summit. My call to action is collaborate. We didn't know a lot when we entered this journey. We still don't know a lot, but we're discovering an awful lot. Whatever other industries can teach each other, I think is going to really pave the way here. And I think this can't just be a aviation. This can't just be a mining or manufacturing or whatever. It is not just a problem for one industry. How we learn from each other is absolutely key. So if anybody wants to continue this discussion, wants to offer opportunities to meet, to go out, see what each other is doing in their fields, I think that's the better option. I think that we need to understand more about how it's impacting certain people, because you might learn, you might discover something that you never expected. And like I said, to try and get up that curve, get out the other side, get accelerating up to a better, safer place, I think we need to work together, not just within our own industries, but cross industries as well. So I think this is a great example. It's a great platform to do that. So thanks to you, Dan, and I think thank you to Brandon as well for including us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I think that, again, that's the core of Safety Nights is collaboration, community, working together to solve this problem. And so again, all I can say is thank you for taking this time to say yes to be a part of the summit and share this. It doesn't look like we have any additional questions. So I guess what we'll do is we'll wrap this up. Russell, again, thank you from the bottom of our heart. Our next summit, we do have our next session is going to be later today at 2 p.m. with Carrie. So I hope to see everybody there. And I hope that you're all, enjoying this summit. Feel free to email me if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, and I'll be there to help address those. Russell, again, thank you. And I look forward to seeing everybody at our next summit at 2 p.m. Eastern today.
Thank you.